Yo guys, INFESTATION here, bringing you some more Call of Duty Black Ops 7 content, with today's video being around the Infestation Master Camo grind for zombies, with an overview of the grind in itself, my experiences along the way, tips and tricks to help both new players with achieving this awesome camo, and discussing all of the relevant aspects such as the Ashes of the Damned, the main map for zombies, the weapons, and even the strategies or points of interest which work better or worse in this journey, and how all of these can influence the camo grind in itself. So sit back, stay tuned, and let's get right into it. So I guess first things first, what I'll do with this video is I'll start off with the camo overview and then do my reflections and my experiences at the end of the video, because I appreciate you'll probably click on this video to hear on how best to do the camo before you even are interested in any of my opinions or experiences so far. So what I'll do is I'll go over all of the actual requirements, my tips and tricks along the way that I've learned to do it in a regular time, not a fastest time of all time like you see some of these videos out there. This is how you can do it in the most ridiculous time ever. No, I appreciate some of us are out there with real-time, full-time jobs and lives outside of this game where we have to manage and juggle the two, and you are not going to be able to get this as fast as you possibly want. But in the meantime, you are also going to want to be more efficient and use strategies to help you guys that maybe you haven't already considered. And this video should hopefully help you guys. For like I said, I'm a regular player, I have a full-time job, and I have all of those outside environmental world sort of issues that everybody else has to tackle, not like a full-time creator or a streamer who doesn't maybe have all of those things that they have to manage, and they can just spend every minute of the day once the game launches to get this camo really quickly. And there may be other exploits that they don't consider in those videos. So hopefully this video just maybe summarizes it for help sort of newer players and also more casual players to get in this camo a lot easier, and things that maybe you haven't considered along the way. So to begin, I guess, the first thing you need to understand is you need 30 weapons to unlock the Doomsteel camo on in order to achieve and unlock the final Infestation Master camo. Now, that does not necessarily mean the 30 original weapons in the game. Now that this video has come out, you can see that there are other guns that have been added to the game, a new submachine gun, a new assault rifle with the Maddox, other weapons that you can consider using instead, so that you can avoid using weapons that maybe you weren't looking forward to using, such as the launchers or even the melee weapons, whatever it might be. Now, for myself, I did start this grind literally from day one. I think I went into zombies when I was like level 12. I got to Prestige Master really quickly. I also played public matches and got the Singularity camo, so I know how to juggle between the two and work out other areas, which is a tip I'm going to advise on later on in the video. But for the weapons in itself, you basically want to choose and sort of calculate which 30 weapons you're going to want to do. And that, like I said, a little tip, a little bit of a shortcut is maybe consider using some of the newer weapons if you have the battle pass, because it can save you some time with not having to use the likes of a launcher, because I found personally that the arc launcher, the second launcher, was actually a bit of a pain in the arse. I did not like it, and I found it was a bit more awkward, especially taking on the bears later if you're going to use all of the ammo. But just generally, that's a bit of an overview and an insight that maybe you guys haven't considered. Don't use necessarily the original weapons, just factor in which 30 weapons you're going to do before you start your journey, and then go on that path. Now, I would also say, if you're going to prestige as well, and you're just not thinking about this ahead of time, and you didn't really consider this, make sure you use the latter weapons, the weapons you unlock further down the line in your level unlocks, and not perhaps the earlier guns, because every time you prestige, you will lose access to these weapons, and maybe you didn't consider that, and you'll come to a point in your journey where you have to go look around the map and find these weapons on the wall, which is another point now leads me nicely onto, is there are so many weapons around the map on Ashes of the Damned. Almost every single weapon in the game, apart from maybe 7, I think it was, that are not on the wall, and you can pretty much multitask and juggle those weapons later on in your journey. Obviously, right at the start, it's pretty basic. You have to just use everything available to you, but later on, this is really crucial. Start understanding where these weapons are, which sort of point of interest has these set weapons, and where you maybe want to train and multitask your game in order to balance and just achieve and tick off those items later on in your games, because that will become a time where if you want to be more efficient, you need to know where certain weapons are, and you're not relying on the box RNG and trying to spin that box over and over again in order to get a weapon, because finding a certain gun that you need later and around the map is really helpful, especially if you're really close to ticking off one area of the list. I'll give you an example. If you're on the Doomsteel camo and you need a certain weapon to get bear kills, the elite enemies on this map, the Xersas, and you need to get that later on in the game, if you knew that there was a weapon that you needed to do using the camo tracker by pressing start on your console or on PC and checking the camo tracker, it can literally tell you how you have progressed with that certain weapon, and you can see quite literally if you go to a certain area on the map that you know a weapon is available to you on the wall, you can take that weapon, kill a couple more bears, and drop that gun instantly. You don't have to go through the whole process of starting a new game using that weapon just for the sake of using 2 or 3 Xersas and then moving on. As you you can see, if you understand where weapons are on the map, you can be far more efficient. So this is really useful, and just definitely consider this for later in the camo grind if you're at that point in your journey. However, we're going to backtrack and go right to the start of this, because originally the first set of camos that you need to do and achieve in this game are the military camos, which for almost every single weapon in this game is critical kills, and it really is not that difficult this year. I got Nebula last year, and it was actually 2,000 headshots last year for most of the weapons, whereas this year it's only 1,000, which makes it a lot quicker, and this is why I managed to do this in under 22 hours of playing time. Not actual real life time, this is 22 hours of game time using only 39 games, because in my games I found a bit of a mixture of going further in the game by finding multiple weapons and getting around 2.5 to maybe 3,000 headshots per game. You were ticking off nearly 3 weapons of all military camos in your one single game. But other people have found, and I've seen other tips and strategies that says go to round 31 and then just exfil, but you only get around maybe 2,000 if you're lucky, if you're really efficient and you use other methods. But personally, I found if you go to 41, that tends to be the sweet spot where the zombies do get a bit more difficult, but you end up finding more enemies and you eventually will get to around 3,000. But it also depends on how set up you are, and if you've had any issues along the way, i.e. you've lost perks and you're starting to deal less damage to zombies, and you don't have PAP 3 weapons. All of these things are really important to consider. If you are fully set up, I personally would advise going to 41. You'll find it a lot easier to still kill those zombies, but you'll also have more zombies per round, meaning technically if we're looking for efficiency here, and that's why you guys are on the video and you're looking for that strategy, 41 was the soft spot or the sweet spot for myself, and that's where I found a lot more zombies and more success getting headshots. However, anytime you mess up along the way, you lose perks, or you end up switching your weapon out because you completed a weapon and you're looking to start a new gun, but you couldn't get it to gold rarity, or you can't get to PAP 3, and then you just find that weapon is too weak, maybe consider exfilling and just starting again. That is typically the sort of rinse and repeat cycle that you kind of need to grasp the reality of. It's all down to how set up you are and whether you want to sacrifice or have gobblegums available to you. That also helps you guys with setting up your game later for that camera grind, being more efficient. Having gobblegums available to you definitely makes it a lot easier. You can also use simple methods by going into the spawn areas and using the little fumigator and setting off the plant, luring zombies into that trap, and also using the toxic growth field upgrade. By placing that on top of those traps, you will effectively allow yourself to earn free perks and also free pack-a-punch weapons. So that's a little bit of a cheat code as well, guys. Maybe you can consider using that if you weren't aware. By literally planting this toxic growth field upgrade on top of them, this will allow you to get some bonus rewards and set you up very early in your games, and also of course saves you a lot of essence later down the line, which means you could probably multitask more than just 2 weapons in a single game. And also, just final point on that, Mule Kick has now been added by the time of seeing this video, so that is also a really good bonus as well. Going into the new map, of course, you can either play Ashes or of course the new map, and also have Mule Kick available to you, so you can have 3 weapons on the go. So it really helps you later on down the line, especially if you're trying to use one for the Doomsteel camo and you're just trying to get those bears, and once you tick it off, you want to start on a new weapon. All of these things to consider that maybe you guys haven't already, so hopefully this should help you out. And then for the other weapons, aside from headshots, is point blanks for the things like the shotguns, where you can use things like Frenzied Guard, which is a really useful tip. Just sit yourself in a corner, use things like insta-kill maybe, and look at the floor. Using things like that and just putting yourself in a close quarter environment using the shotgun will really allow you to farm through those point blanks far quicker and also far safer, where you're not just losing all your plates and risking going down every 5 seconds. Also, if you're going to use the launchers, make sure you have PhD flopper. This is almost essential. You're going to end up downing yourself, especially in the later parts of the game and in those rounds where it's going to be far more difficult, so just maybe use that. And as for the melee weapons, I would definitely, if you're going to use these, make sure you use them right at the start of your game, every game you do, and don't maybe force the weapon later on. Just literally use these melee weapons right at the start to a point where they become only 2 hit. If any point that they go past that and they go to a 3 hit, maybe just switch and start using your actual weapons. And if you do this through enough games, you will get those 1,000 eliminations so much easier. And also during insta kills, I would also recommend maybe just using your melee here and there, because that also helps you guys out. And of course, as well as using Frenzied Guard and other things like maybe Ether Shroud, which will help you use the melee weapons. I also just personally found upgrading the melee weapon really did set you back. So if you were going to fully commit to a melee weapon and you started upgrading it loads, I found that it past that round 31 point, you really struggled against those bears and other mobs later on in the journey. So I found that personally just not upgrading the melees was actually a far more efficient method. And the reason being for that is because the points you end up spending upgrading that melee and of course the salvage meant that you're going to sacrifice and sort of put yourself at detriment using your primary and secondary as well. And meaning anything past 31, if you did not have a Pack-a-Punch 3 weapon or at least gold as as well, if you just found it a lot harder to deal with enemies. And if, of course, if you did make a mistake and go down as well and lost any of your perks, you then just basically had to spend so much more time and lost out on so much more efficiency by having to do this. So I found personally using the melees at the start, using them during insta kills, and just juggling them every single game in such sort of simultaneously managing other primary and secondaries as well. This was far more efficient for myself. So maybe if you're going to do the melees and you didn't consider this, this would definitely work out better in my opinion. And then also it's really useful to consider the areas. Now I personally spent a lot of time at every single area in the map, including the spawn all the way through to exit 115, but I did have a soft spot for the Blackwater Lake. That tends to have been the area where I spent a lot of my time. I don't know what it was, maybe because it was more new to myself, or maybe I just liked the area, I don't know, but I found that on the Ice Lake it was pretty easy and flat for headshots, and I also just quite liked the training route in itself. But the farm was also useful, and I did use 5-all farm as well as Ashes of the Dam farm, but I found Ashes once I got around to playing that, and also wanted to start working on Easter egg steps as well, just in the background. I didn't fully go for the Easter egg, which that is going to be an episode we're going to upload on the channel shortly, of me completing that Easter egg guide. But in itself, going for the maps, I think that farm was definitely one of the better places, but personally just wasn't my favorite. I found there was too many obstacles in your path, and I felt like it wasn't that easy or flat for headshots. So personally, I would recommend, if you're going to go for headshots, go somewhere else. I definitely would say that Ascension, that I think that the Cosmodrome area was probably better than here as well, because of the sort of inclined and declined ramps going up and down into it. I found that they were actually pretty easy to sort of lead a whole horde of zombies down and up that, and that was also kind of flat, of course, depending on the elevation. But I also just found that generally the training pathways and the way you sort of moved around in that area was far easier than maybe managing farm. So maybe consider going there. And also exit 115, I really just like that area in itself, so I found that was good. I definitely would say Ashwood was probably my least favorite in terms of going for the camo. That was just not easy at all. I found it was quite difficult to manage and juggle. The elevations didn't work out, but again, it depends on what point in the camera grind you are at. But for the military camos, that's pretty much it. You kind of just want to get as many guns on the go as possible so that you don't leave yourself short-handed later on where you're relying on a set weapon. And just like I said, make sure you're considering which weapons aren't on the map at the time, which a short list is the Jaeger pistol, the starting pistol, the Velox pistol, the MX R17 assault rifle, the RK9, the Razor 9mm, the Carbon 57, and the MPC, all submachine guns. As you can see, a lot of them are submachine guns, and also, of course, the launchers are not as small buys on the map, and of course, the melee weapons, which you, of course, will always have one of the two, or of now three if you include the ballistic knife, at the point of recording this, of course, but most of the weapons are on the map. You just need to know where they are, which does help you, of course, in the area you're training. If you know that there is a weapon you can switch to at any point, this will significantly help you. So just make sure you're considering these aspects when you're doing the camera grind yourself, and you're going to be more efficient by understanding what is not available to you, of course, what is available to you, and relying on the box is not a good method. Having that RNG aspect just adds more stress and tension, unnecessary stress. So just think about these things. If you hadn't already, hopefully this has helped you guys out and saved you a lot of time, because I learned this the hard way. I guess not the hard way, but I've just learned this last year in the Nebula camera grind on things like if you were playing Liberty Falls or Terminus, knowing where weapons were around the map definitely saves you a lot of time. So just bear that in mind throughout your camera grind. Now, the special camos is kind of where the problem starts, really, for this camera grind. And I shouldn't really say problem. It's more where the first roadblock, or I guess obstacle, lies, because to this point, it's pretty straightforward, right? It's just get headshots or point blanks, and that's pretty much it. Or eliminations, of course, if you use it melees. But these special camos is really where you need to be sharp and stay on top of your game, because if you're using a weapon and you're not aware of all three of the special camo requirements for that set weapon, you're really going to be less efficient. And what I mean by that is if one of them, and a lot of them do, require you to use a set ammo mod, if you're not aware of what that one is, you're going to be killing zombies pointlessly for the most part and not really progressing any camo from that point with that weapon. So basically, it just feels like you're clearing rounds and using a weapon for the sake of no reason. So if you're trying to be efficient, make sure you use camo tracking apps or websites or whatever, or you just take screenshots like myself of those camos going into that game, so you remind yourself you know exactly what all three are. So as soon as you do the final headshot or point blank, you know what you need to be doing. So get that weapon set, whether it's a rarity weapon or whether you have to get the fireworks ammo mod or napalm burst. And also, like I said earlier in the video, if you are someone that likes prestiging and you go further in that sort of prestige journey, make sure you understand which level unlocks you earn each of these items. So for the first ones, you will get the Shatter Blast, Light Mend, and Dead Wire available to you at level 1, but you unlock Cryo Freeze at level 12, Fireworks at 18, Napalm Burst at 35, Shadow Rift at 44, and Brain Rot at 51. So like I said, Make sure you're aware of that as well, because you don't want to be on the special camo for a weapon you've fully decked out, but literally not be able to sort of progress any further, which will really just delay you, and you'll have to either resort to dropping that weapon and sacrificing it and working on a new one, or you just won't be able to physically go any further, so you may have to exfil, whatever it may be. I found at only 2 points in my journey, because I was someone who went for the earlier camo, like that Prestige Master. Like I said, I've got there now at this point, and that was something I had to multitask and manage along the way. It only caught me out at 2 different points where I wasn't really that far off either. There was one game literally I was like 2 levels away, and there was one game I was like 7 levels away. So I literally just saved and quit, went on to something else. I went on to public matches because I was also grinding Singularity, and just simply went and just leveled up that way, and then just reminded myself that I needed to go back into zombies to achieve that next camo, that special camo. And some of the things you need to understand with the specials, it's some of them say with this sort of ammo mod equipped, you need to get 300 eliminations, which that one is just really easy. But some of them are like, with this ammo mod, get 75 activation kills using Shadow Rift, or get 75 activations using Napalm Burst. That's where it's far more tedious. And one definite ammo mod that we all found in this camera grind, if you've already done it, was the fireworks. Make sure you research and augment this thing early on in your journey, because the fireworks seems to be something that you have to use quite a lot and more frequently than maybe the other ammo mods. And this was also going to be more tedious because it only got 7 or 8 each time, that depending on how far you'd researched it, but you'd get about 7 fireworks kills each time. And there was a handful of guns that needed to use fireworks. There was a handful for the Napalm Burst. I think there was 1 or 2 for the Dead Wire, and there was a couple as well for the Shadow Rift. So just like I said, make sure you're considering all of these things. Multitasking, prestiging, multitasking different camos is also a little tip that I would give for any new players as well. Personally, for my own sort of grind, I've always found that if you're going to go for multiple master camos, then multitasking 2 or more on the same time, I know that sounds quite overwhelming for some people, but I found that far more efficient for myself, more mental fortitude. Having that fatigue factor, knowing you're just doing the same thing over and over again, sometimes makes it less enjoyable. Whereas if you're switching up and you're changing your environments sort of frequently, it makes it far more enjoyable, and sometimes just makes you a bit more efficient and refreshing that sort of grind. Because if you're just doing zombies for 8 hours a day and you're only doing camos and we're not enjoying the actual zombies experience, it can get quite draining. Of course, like, I'm a more higher skill player and I get this camo every year and I go for these things far quicker than most other people. But for my own experience, I found multitasking is definitely far more efficient for myself. Of course, some people might have just clicked onto this video, or you might be hearing this and you're only going for Infestation because, one, it's the coolest one in my opinion, but also you might just be a zombies player and you only really want that one anyways. Then of course, disregard what I've just said and just find your own efficient methods in your own gameplay. But hopefully all of those tips and tricks along to this point have definitely helped some way, in one way or another. You have got one more efficient tip that you've learned, because hopefully there's a lot of that I've just gone over and mentioned so far in this video, and I would like to think that you hadn't maybe considered everything you've heard so far. If you had, I do apologize. But going into the final part of the camo grind journey, you have to obviously get the Bloodstone camo, which is incredible, by the way. By getting all of the camos, or sort of those weapons in that category, whether it's all the subs to the golden camo, you unlock that Bloodstone camo, which I personally think is one of the coolest and nicest looking camos both in this game and actually for quite some time. I really like that camo. I loved earning it really early in the game and using it in my online experiences and playing multiplayer and playing S&D, and using that weapon, that camo was just incredible. I thought it looked really flashy and just really aesthetically pleasing. But also for the camo, you have to basically take no damage whilst getting eliminations on zombies. So finding areas where you can build a bit of a buffer, using weapons that take a lot longer to shoot, I found it a lot more difficult, as you can probably tell, for this camo. But making sure you use things to protect yourself, whether using higher elevations or whether using, like I said, areas where you can build yourself a couple seconds. One little tip I found was making sure, if you're at a higher round and you're doing this, bring in a whole horde of zombies first. Don't start killing as you go. Get the whole round count capped out, then start killing. Because what you'll find is if you keep killing as you go, you'll get zombies just appear out of nowhere behind you. And if you're playing without a minimap or whatever, you won't realize where you're going to get hit from. So just a little bit of a little sort of smaller tip I would say is make sure you let more zombies into the wave first, then kill them, and then train around again and try that. Also using things like maybe Ether Shroud, that maybe could help you guys out because you'll be concealed from enemies and you can deal more damage. Another thing I would say is use the Temporal Gift Gobblegum, and also use the Killjoy Gobblegum. That way you will get a whole 1 minute of of just insta-kill, and you can use this at the later part of the rounds where you're going to have more zombies available to you, and you can sit yourself somewhere where you're going to be far more likely to take less damage and also eliminate an entire round. That is how I basically found it the most efficient way. You can use certain areas, it doesn't really matter. It's all about comfort and using and understanding your own training cycles, and also the way zombies come into the map is kind of really where you want to understand how to do this camo. And then of course the final part is the Doomsteel camo. This part was really tedious and really what slows down the entire journey and also makes it really frustrating. But of course it would not be a master camo if there wasn't a really difficult element to this, because to this point realistically it was really straightforward. Last year I did like that you could multitask this camo. You could effectively have one weapon on the Afterlife camo and you could do another gun in the background, whereas on this camo it kind of felt like you were just pointlessly killing zombies in the entire part on the whole way through this last camo, because you did not need zombies anymore for this camo. It was purely about defeating 10 elite zombies or enemies with these weapons, and there's a lot of them, right? So you have to kill a lot of bears or uber classes, which is the kind of the tip here, is making sure at round 8 you go near the Janice Towers Plaza and spawn in that uber class, because getting him into the game earlier on meant that you could farm 2 of the elite zombies right from the sort of earlier part of the game. And if you can manage this later on, I found this a lot more efficient for myself and just generally throughout the game in itself. So I basically, what I did is I either used the gift card, Gobblegum, or I used the Perkaholic, got myself set up really early, or I used other things like double points, who's coupon score, and other areas where you can basically build as much essence as possible, get yourself set up with at least a pack-a-punch 1 weapon and at least rare rarity, and then go and take on the Uber class. And that is how I found the starting point, starting at round 8, and then basically what I was doing was defeating the entire zombies first, letting the round go to round 9, killing the Uber class, and then saving quitting. And that is the most efficient method that I found and others have found as well. By saving and quitting and then spawning back into your game, you would spawn in that elite boss straight away again in the start of that round. And effectively what I did, which is where the tricky part was both eliminate the zombies first, let the round move to the next round, then defeat the elite boss. That's the way I found it to be far more efficient, because if you just straight up eliminate him right at the start of the round and save and quit, you will find that he won't sometimes spawn back in the following rounds and you'll lose the Uber class. Whereas the bears, we know they spawn at round 16 and so on. And from that point onwards, every other round or every 3 rounds or so, a bear or a Zersa will basically spawn in. But I have to say, leaving those elite enemies to run around and roam at the latter part of your game, anything past round 20 was extremely difficult. So there was a real fine line of, should I just eliminate them straight away and then move to the next round and wait for more to spawn in, or do I try and eliminate the zombies still? This was the ultimatum that I was left with on this final part, but I found that if you were set up enough, you could find a way to train maybe around the lake or whether he was in the farm to defeat the entire round of zombies, weaken those elite enemies so that they're quite weak, so that way as soon as the round ended, you could physically just kill them, move on, save and quit, and then start again. And I found that up to around about maybe 24-ish, 25, it was manageable. But if you any point past that, if you're just trying to let those bears run around with the Uber class, it became really difficult to both stay alive and also not kill them. So I just found sometimes just get rid of them really quickly, leave maybe the Uber class if you can manage him still do the same thing, and then leave the Uber class going. I found that I was getting 2, maybe 3 no, more than that. I was getting about 3 to 4 Doomsteel guns a game when I got myself set up. So it doesn't take too long, but of course it takes about an hour and a half to do a full game. So you can see how 4 guns maybe every hour and a half still does take a while, and maybe there are more efficient methods. So feel free to let me know down below, guys, if you have done this camo, you've taken part and you can relate to this journey, you can understand the frustrations, and maybe there's some more advanced tips that you could suggest for both newer players who haven't maybe done it, also just a learning point for myself. So maybe let me know down below in the comments, and that is going to be really useful, like I said, for new players who haven't yet done this camo. And if you guys are like me and you're a camo grinder and you want to get all of the master camos because you did not know that there is a secret master camo in this game called the Nexus camo, that if you get all 4 master camos, both Genesis on Endgame and Co-op campaign, the Infestation on zombies, the Apocalypse in Warzone, and Singularity in multiplayer, you will then unlock a 5th and final master camo called Nexus. And this has just further sort of inspired and fueled me to go on now to get those final camos, because I was getting to a little bit of a question point for myself of, do I even bother going for any 4th camo? Because I already have Singularity, I now have Infestation, which I was always going to get those 2. The 3rd one I was always debating whether it was going to be Endgame, which I really enjoy, by the way, and I highly recommend for you guys, or the Apocalypse one in Warzone. Warzone, because I didn't think it was worth it to a point, because you only have 3 weapons. You have a primary, a secondary, and a melee weapon. So I thought, well, you're never going to be able to show off that 4th one, whichever it may be. But now that there's a Nexus camo, I have to do it. It's something that I have to do and take part in, and know that I did not leave this stone unturned. So that's something I'm going to share with you guys and continue to create content for the Endgame content, where I'm going to do the Genesis camo grind and share another video in a few weeks' time, the Apocalypse camo grind for Warzone on the new map, the Haven's Hollow, which I also love, by the way, and then the final master camo in the game, the secret, one of the rarest camos of all time in Call of Duty, with the Nexus camo. So stay tuned and stick around for that in future content, which I'll continue to produce on a weekly basis, both zombies content, going into Ashes of the Dam Easter egg guides, and of course Astra Malorum, and as well as just further multiplayer gameplay and other things like endgame content. So if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you stick around. If you have enjoyed this video, as always, do not forget to like and subscribe, as it massively helps me out. I'm hopeful that this guide has really helped you guys along the way with learning new things. If you have any suggestions on any upcoming videos that you want to see on the channel, also let me know down below, guys, in the comments, and I'll get right back to you. I'm VisionSGen. I really hope you enjoyed the video and found this useful, and I'll see you in the next one.